The honourable member for Saanich Gulf Islands.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm rising to speak to this bill, but I doubt very much I will use a full 10-minute slot or 20-minute slot. I've not been, I realize debate was, I think, on the verge of collapsing, and I only wish to say more than I was able to say earlier in questions and comments. It is lamentable that we approach something as critical as the injustices, embedded racism, and deep discriminatory aspects of the Indian Act in an attempt to deal with a deadline for one court case. I think it is unfortunate that the bill began its course in the Senate and has come to us with an important amendment that is not supported by the government, but which to many of us, I think, on this side of the House, and certainly I think some others from the Liberal benches, is the only thing that makes it possible to vote for the bill, is the amendments that come from the other place that ensure that all gender discriminatory aspects have been removed. It is only through those eliminations of gender discriminatory aspects that one could imagine voting, at least from this side of the House, for the legislation. I recognize that the policy downsides for the government are the vast unknowns of how many people would then become status, quote-unquote, Indians within the meaning of the Indian Act, and whether there would be knock-on effects and unintended consequences. This is a difficult place for parliamentarians to find themselves. As we deal with this bill, I remind us all, only at second reading. Normally this would be a bill on its way to committee, but as we heard from members of the committee, particularly the member for Peace River Westlock, he can't say how he would vote on this bill until the committee finishes its work. So we find ourselves in a doubly, perhaps triply awkward space, and I as a parliamentarian, I try to stay on top of all my files, but S3 is one that I find not ready for vote in this place. It is going to committee, but I very much fear that positions are already entrenched, that the government doesn't want to approve the amendments that came forward from the Senate. Those amendments are the only things that actually eliminate all aspects of the discriminatory aspects of who can inherit the status of their parents and grandparents and so on. It certainly is an appalling situation that we live under this act, where it is people outside of Indigenous communities who decide who is Indigenous and who isn't. So the vast Gordian knot of Bill S3 rather, will not be fixed in this second reading debate tonight. Given time pressures to get this through by July 3rd, I doubt very much if it can be fixed in the committee that will now study it before it comes back to this place at report stage. I just want to register as strongly as I can a plea that we not treat this as just something to deal with a quick fix for a specific problem, but as much as possible open our minds to the bigger question of how do we, in 2017, 150 years from Confederation, commit to striking down the oppressive, colonial, discriminatory act on which South Africa's apartheid was based. We all know this. It's an appalling situation that, as our friend from Abitibi, James Bay, Ayu, I'm forgetting one of the parts of the names of his riding, forgive me, but he identified here how, I know, Nunavik, Ayu, he identified here that under the Indian Act, the minister could decide to nullify his personal will and bequest to family. It is appalling that in 2017, this is still the law of the land, and we're dealing with one piece of it. But I would urge the committee, if they possibly can, and I would urge the minister and the government, if they possibly can, to use this opportunity to signal that we want to get outside and beyond and out from under this discriminatory piece of legislation. It will be way beyond the mandate of amendments to this bill to actually fix the Indian Act. I know that. But can we make some bigger commitments to get out from under a racist and discriminatory piece of legislation before the end of the 41st Parliament? Because if we just push it down the road to another Parliament, they won't get rid of it either. and there'll always be an excuse for why we're not ready. And as the member for Winnipeg North said, how long does a man have to wait for justice? How long does a woman have to wait for justice? How long do First Nations children have to wait for equal funding under the law that they've already been promised? It's far too long. And First Nations, when I see the calls from Idle No More for July 1st to be about unsettling, I sympathize so deeply with that, and I understand Idle No More, but if there's anything that has defined the response of Indigenous peoples on this continent to cultural genocide and abuse and oppression, it's patience. It's such a deeply moving degree of tolerance and patience for the oppression from settler society. So, Mr. Speaker, I can't add much to the S3 debate. I can't vote for S3 unless it includes the amendments that the Senate, that the other places sent us, that create a situation where there will not be gender discrimination, but it's within a fabric of a bill that's entirely about racial discrimination. So I urge us to do something better and something more with every opportunity that comes our way. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Questions and comments?